And we are live. Hello, hello, hello. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network.com. Like sometime this week, crossing my fingers.
All of them.
Oh, Lord. It's been such an ordeal. What the hell was I saying?
I'm Morgan. I used to be Heather.
And
I will
that
get better at
is
this.
right. Like the best foot this could ever possibly start on, my friend.
Yeah.
This is Battles Worth Fighting. All right. So Morgan is a game master who teaches. Listen, these shows
I'm
are.
not even sure teaches is the right word.
I don't even think teaches is the
torture
right word.
groups
Guides.
with
I mean,
adventures that are very, very fun and make you confront all your inner demons and icky bits in a way.
Tortures with
adventures.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Face to face with them.
This
and I got sworn at a lot. It's perfect.
You do get sworn at a lot.
Usually by you, but yeah.
So I've been a member of Morgan's role-playing adventures for, 2 years now?
Yeah, I think it has been 2 years since we started the beta.
Since you started beta testing the whole thing.
It might even be 3.
Wow.
Because we were ready to go live with the proper one right when the first lockdown hit, and that was 2020. So, no. 2.5, nearly 3.
So, fundamentally, it's a role-playing game-ish. And when you initially started testing it, we were playing for business purposes. I think it's kind of morphed into general life skills.
Basically stopped caring about that part as much anymore.
Right. I think
it always felt a little bit bolted on originally. What used to happen was we had the game and we had like these checklist things that you were meant to do each week for your business to get
business skills. We used the RPG to learn business skills. It was all it was a lot of fun. But I think the actual growth and progress of the game was found in the soft skills that it teaches. And I think that's true, honestly, for most RPGs. Like, I read a really great, I don't know, probably came from Tumblr.
Probably.
A story about a guy who was game mastering for the Wizards of the Coast launch for the Star Wars RPG. So this is back in the day, right? Like 80s.
Yeah, and this was a minute ago.
They did it at a restaurant and people would come in and like it's the Star Wars RPG. So really the intro walkthrough, you can win without Jedi, but the whole point is really
you're Jedi. Gonna be a
Jedi. Right. And he gets this very old English couple who had obviously been through World War II,
of course,
who come in and start commandeering the action, and the other game players just started calling the guy Lieutenant, right? Like,
and why wouldn't you at that point?
And why wouldn't you at that point? And they won based off of, playing it the way that it's old-fashioned battle tactics, right? Oh, we know this. It's ambushing and it's subterfuge and it's all of the things. No Jedi required. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So let's be said for doing it properly.
And I tell that story to say that for you, that's kind of what this has become. It started as a business building tool.
I mean, way back in the day, it was like, okay, this is the fun bit you get to do if you've done all your chores for the week. Like,
It was because we played on Friday afternoon. It was great fun. Okay, so structurally, the game has evolved from being an RPG about business to what exactly?
I mean, to be fair, was the RPG part ever actually about business?
No, but the skills related were.
I suppose that's true. I think structurally now it's much more about the role playing,
Mm-hmm.
and you still do get the skills, but they're more there to encourage you to think around things differently. Like you'll remember from the beta, we used to assign certain amounts of uses for each skill per
Mm-hmm.
week, theoretically based on what you've done. I must admit, it was more based on what I felt like giving you that week.
Oh right, it was
Like,
Calvin ball
it was
points,
so
right?
fun.
There are no rules. The points don't matter. I'm just gonna give you whatever I feel like giving
Yeah.
you.
And then it was the player's job to figure out if any of it was useful and how they could use it. And if they wanted to use any of them at all, because you didn't actually have to all of
Mm-mm,
the time, but
mm-mm.
it was fun.
No, I mean structurally, it's very much a role playing game, and it just turns out to develop a set of soft character building skills. They are the elementals.
Yep.
Oh,
Which, true to form, were originally just a, oh, we can have pets,
yes,
excited
I remember
little thing.
pets. I
And
still wear
then
mine.
they casually took over the
Hmm.
entirety of the game and came with all their own lore and baggage and stuff. So now it's probably the most useful part. Let's be fair here.
It's been fun being involved in this and watching it evolve, and I feel like as a tool, it has the potential to be very helpful for the way people interact with their parts.
Mhm. And I've also noticed that as like a leadership training tool, even it's pretty superb because what happens while you're playing is through the course of the game, you encounter situations that aren't exactly like they are in your real life, whatever you're doing, business, life, whatever. But there's enough similarities to all of it that you'll find yourself casually wandering along and then bumping smack straight into something that's going to trigger you or make you really upset or whatever. But the best part about that is you don't shy away from it before you're there. So you have to confront what it is. And then you can move past it and start to figure out your nonsense a bit better.
So, what we're going to be doing in this series is talking about the ways elementals show up very specifically in terms of your nonsense and what function they serve in terms of helping you to have a dialogue. So, in this episode today, we're gonna talk about the 6 types very basically. And then we're gonna look at, I think, the ways that they can start to work together.
Yep. Sort of what they are, how they're going to mess with you, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, take it from the top, my friend.
All right. So everyone knows the first four elementals, or they should, because I can't think of many children's programs that don't touch on them at some point. You've got earth, air, fire, and water. There's another two that I tend to add, which are a little bit more complicated, but light and dark, still fairly straightforward. And they all do different kinds of things. They tend to complain about different sectors of your life. And when they're in a good mood, they tend to, I suppose, bless different parts of your life, enhance it a little bit. So, I don't know, it's maybe easiest if we just go through bit by bit briefly and then go from there, really. So, Earth is basically your structural backbone. Wherever you have set things out in an orderly fashion with planning and frameworks and a beginning, middle, and end, that's usually Earth doing its thing. So, whenever things are particularly chaotic, it usually means that your Earth is not working quite as intended. Or, conversely, if things have gotten to be a bit rigid in your thinking, where you're not flexible or looking at things from multiple different views, that's where you've, for want of a better word, calcified your Earth a bit. So that's how that one works. Air, as its opposite, is more to do with your ideas and your communication and how you're talking about the things you're doing and what you're, well, a little bit of what your dreams are. That's more of a water one, but they mesh. And if it's not quite working, then too strong an air will blow all your structures over and cause the chaos I just talked about. Too little air, nothing's moving. You're not really speaking. You don't really want to share much with the rest of the world. You don't particularly want to step out and do things publicly, is usually how that goes. Fire is honestly one of my favorites, actually. They tend to be your inner drive, your motivation, your passion. When it is happy and things are growing at a steady rate that it can support, then that's when you find yourself doing a lot of things and not burning out from it. If it's not happy, if you've got too much of the fire going on, you burn out a lot faster. You don't have much of a sense of meaning to your work. You're just going, and going. Too little fire, and you're not moving. You might desperately want to move, but you're not. This is where burnout tends to live, actually. And you might even, if you'd previously been going along quite happily, you might smother your flames a little bit by giving it too much ammo and it collapses. But we'll get more into that when we get to Fire's episode because it's quite a complicated little beast. Water, being the opposite of fire, is where you get a lot of your deeper meaning, your storytelling, your, oh, this is what this means. These are my feelings about this thing. It's slightly more flowery in terms of language as well, but it works quite well with the others usually to just sort of bring that richness and fullness to your life, really. When it's got too much of the water, everything is way too heavy. It's like you're waterlogged. Every task you're trying to do has too much emotion attached to it, so you can't even get started. It's those days where you wake up and you just go, I'm exhausted already because you've got your task weight and then you've got all the extra water weight on top. It's when there's too much of it. Too little, as we just said, with fire, nothing much matters, really. And when every task has too much attached to it, when there's so much, that also contributes to burnout because everything's heavy, your fire's not happy, you're done.
And elemental management for me, so it's magical-ish. Like, structurally, foundationally, the 4 elements are present in a lot of systems. They are pretty easy to extrapolate out to personal life without a whole lot of intent really required.
They've lived around about in
Mm-hmm.
our lore and whatever for such a long time that we all have some idea of what their flavor is, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, where you diverge then from the more traditional elemental structure is when we add in light and dark. Although I gotta be honest, for me, structurally, these have been probably the most important additions to my inner dialogue. So walk us through a little bit what and who they are.
Okay, I'm going to have a quick drink first because I can hear myself becoming greedy, but then I'll do that. So, light and dark don't quite work the same way as the other elementals. They're just as present. You can still kind of hear your voices for them, and we'll get into that later. But really, what they do is influence the other elementals' behavior to a greater or lesser degree. So, light, I mean, we'll start there, is really more your extrinsic motivations. It's where you show up in the world, where your fame appears, where your actual rewards, quote unquote, for doing the things you do show up in your life. It's the visible, tangible signs that we relate to success quite often. It tends to have the most effect on air and fire, which is pretty logical, really, if you consider air to be your communication, your thoughts, your ideas part, and your fire to be your motivation, your progress, and your drive. They tend to play quite happily. Dark, then, is more to do with your inner motivations and your inner self, the things that you can't quite see, how true you feel you're being to who you are, if you're doing the right sort of things, if you have meaning in your life, and your successes that matter to you but don't necessarily show up on the surface. So it's a lot harder to point to and go, look, see, that was your dark elemental, but it's as powerful as light in its own way. And it tends to play most strongly with your earth and your water elementals. So that's your structure and your feelings and meaning, unsurprisingly. But they also, both light and dark, play with all of them differently. They're not choosy in that regard. When things are going well for light, things are going well on the surface of your life, basically. You're generally happy with how well you're being appreciated. You can feel that praise on the surface by seeing the things you have. If it's not going well, more often than not, you're unknown. You're not being particularly outgoing with your things. In business, that shows up as you're not showing up and communicating, you're not going out and looking for people, etc. For dark, it's a little squiggly. For business, for dark, for example, it shows up as not feeling worthy. Is the main one for almost everything. You can extrapolate the rest out from that. It's how you feel about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you feel like you intrinsically deserve what you've done, if you're okay with yourself, if you're settled and feel like you can show up and be who you are instead of having to be a certain way to impress others, is how that looks.
And the elemental structure here as a framework for inner work has been truly very foundational for me in terms of helping me define my inner landscape, helping me to have conversations with parts. And there is some similarities here to IFS and yet not similarities to IFS, which we can maybe touch in a later episode.
That one a bit.
What structurally has been the benefit here for me is a way to elementally define the inner landscape and troubleshoot what is working and what is not working. So when you start doing elemental work, there become ways to have conversations with these parts of yourself, these guides, and they tend to be fairly self-diagnostic in nature. And I think a lot of people will do this work and put God personifications here, and there's some merit there, but I don't think gods are quite accurate. These are all just elemental parts of who you are at a very foundational level.
Yeah, I suppose that's a fair enough description for them. They're not entirely separate to who you are. So they're not like gods or beings or whatever. No. But they're also not you as in your core self, person inhabiting the body doing the things. Because it's more like they're helpful little voices on your shoulder that complain at you and or praise you for various things. And when we start out with anybody, really, there's questions I ask because all the elementals have their own distinct patterns of speaking and voices, what have you. And I say voices, I mean, I can literally hear it in the words you choose to use to answer the questions. It's awesome. And normally, one or two of them are much, much louder than the others because they're unhappy. So you can go ahead and go, okay, if that's happening, we can then infer that this is happening, and this is happening. Because they show up in groups.
And I think that the interaction is what allows us to shape and structure an inner landscape in a way that allows, so for me, and this manifests differently for all of your people, I know, but for me, it's very much like I can see my earth fields and I can see where things are growing and where things are not growing. And there's this lovely little waterfall that once flooded my whole fucking landscape for a while when I was dealing with a lot of trauma and grief while I was going through MDR.
And I'm smiling, not because you were going through the trauma and grief, but because I remember that you had a cottage specifically that was under the water, but totally dry.
I remember. I believe my cat was stuck in
Your
it.
cat was. He wasn't very impressed with this idea.
And the ability to create and define an inner landscape is, I think, a magical tool that we do not talk about nearly enough. I think especially when you are neurodivergent, the real world has some harsh realities to it. And being able to construct places in your mind where you know what the rules are, where you have an ability to create structure and to determine how things work. And this tool comes up a lot therapeutically. It's used a lot in EMDR. I think Mind Castle, Mind Palace.
Yeah, I think that comes up a lot, even in pop culture.
Right. And it's the idea of creating a room where everything is safe and wonderful. And I think that instinctively, especially if you grow up with trauma, many of us build these landscapes for ourselves.
I mean, I would go so far as to say that everyone has one. I'm not sure if they're always aware of it. But
right.
There's always one there.
And you know, I don't want to get too deep into the metaphysics of it, but arguably everyone really does have one metaphysically. Your ability to access that plane then or define it has real ramifications on this plane here. It's the ways in which we don't talk about or define like 5D. God, I hate that phrase so much. 5D interactions in the 3D world, right? And this is similar. We're not spending enough time really developing the idea of internal landscape structure. And I do think that that is in not, I mean, any modern teachings, this is a not even that high level of skill, and it's something that is frequently overlooked. It exists, and we kind of sort of talk about it, but we're not really doing the work to develop the tools required.
The difficult thing about it is it's one of the most easily explained magical things there is. And I say
yes,
easy,
it's imagination.
You can like codify it and define it and all that stuff. So you can almost be tricked into thinking it's a science, but it's really not.
And there is that pseudo-scientific lure that does present itself. Man, this one's hard because when we talk about spiritual development in particular, there's a line where people are doing
really
the work.
Loaded term, that one.
Right. And where people are building cults. Like, and I want to acknowledge that this is a real tough space to navigate and be in. And what helps, I think, always when it comes to learning and defining new teachings is to recognize your own autonomy within this space, right? And that's where this lives. When you can accurately define your inner landscape, you are much more willing to bring your outer landscape into alignment with your inner landscape and are therefore more willing, I think, to do the work that is required to set the boundaries.
And it's not always that conscious either.
True.
Because a lot of the time, what's going on for us impacts that inner landscape. We don't physically go in and decide to flood the entire plane.
No, certainly not. That was not a conscious choice, me going in and flooding the whole fucking place.
So that's like your day-to-day life impacting there. When you make changes there, it impacts on your day-to-day life as well, because how could it not? It's as much you as being out and about. It's not always a conscious thing, although certainly it can be. I mean, there's been times where we've looked at it for you and gone, okay, well, this is what's happening over here. To fix that, go and do this physical thing over here, and vice versa.
And that is, I think, the structure of the work. And you get people there often through the game, kicking and screaming, but through the game.
The game's fun because for that, it's sort of a shared landscape thing. It isn't strictly your own one. So then you get everybody's different elementals and stuff playing into it. It's a lot of fun.
So let's talk about how we're using the structure of our inner landscape to impact the outer.
Okay. Well, a lot of the time it's diagnostic. When you're looking at the landscape, it becomes very, very easy to see which elemental is not pleased with you. Because, like, and I've seen some things. I've had places where it's just eternally stormy going on, and you go, okay, well, this is where we need to go discuss then. Cool. And I've had other ones where there's volcanoes. I've had ice ages happen sometimes for lack of fire. That's always a good one, because the temptation then is to go in and start burning stuff, but that's not what you need to do. And we'll get into that another time, I'm sure. But primarily it's diagnostic. The next thing is sometimes you just need to go in and fix the problem your landscape is having for it to then start to unravel in the real world. And I say unravel in a good way, because usually that's sticking points and blocks and things you just can't get past. And often we'll fix one thing, leave it a week or so, and then something else will need fixed now that that has been sorted. And it's this evolving thing where I suppose what you're really doing is you're going progressively deeper into whatever actual issue it is, or a collection of issues, because it can be more than one. And you're slowly finding ways to come to terms with that, to accommodate for that, to change the structure out and about in the real world to make that less horrible as well. And it can be even minor tweaks can make a big difference to how that actually goes and feels internally.
So obviously, while I encourage you to go to Battles Worth Fighting and find out more about Heather's available games that are coming this spring, the purpose of this series is to walk you through self-diagnostic techniques, because while the game makes it easier to learn, the whole fucking point here is that your internal landscape can't be gatekept. No one gets to say this is what that should look like or how it should work.
Or Even better. No, you cannot talk to your elementals without me. Don't be silly.
Right, right. So structurally, what I want to provide folks is the ability to actually dig into that work themselves. And I think then we spend the remainder of this episode really talking about how you go about finding your inner landscape and how to trust what is happening there.
It's that second part that's usually a bit more entertaining for people. Hold, please.
Mm-hmm. Right. It
I'll have
definitely
a glass next time, I think. Anyway. So, finding your landscape is both simple and not easy. Because pretty sure if I said to most of you, okay, think of a place that you feel at home, where you're happy and peaceful, you can normally picture it in your head, or at least have some concept of the feeling around it. Now, I have been made aware over the last few years that some people do not actually visually see things within their brains when they're thinking about stuff. This still can work. It'll just take on
so
the same flavor as your thoughts.
Right. I've troubleshooted this with a couple of folks, and I think how it actually works is that you can think of it as words, a place, a story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story that you tell yourself. You may not be able to visualize it, but it's like writing the novel of you.
Mm-hmm. It's not so very different to how you would look at a memory, to be honest. If you remember things visually, like I do, I'm quite visual, then yeah, probably you will see it. If you sort of remember things as a collection of feelings and thoughts and a jumbled thing, which is also fun, it can be a lot like that as well. You're just crafting it, sort of. I say crafting, it's more like discovering where it is, to be entirely fair here. That'll be different for everyone. Mine, if I ever do get lost and go, oh no, I can't find it again, is actually in a tower in the middle of the forest and there's mountains over there. That's my immediate place for it, and then there's the entire rest of it. But there'll be one specific point that it's always easy to go back into.
And I think in EMDR, your safe room, which is for me certainly one of the access points, not the only one, but one of the access points to my inner landscape, is very much a library. It's very like think Beauty and the Beast and the curtains and the colors are a little bit different and it's a little bit darker, but it's very much there's
nice,
this whole
though. Like you've got glowing specks and everything in it is great.
Right. It's pretty. And for me, the library came into existence as a child, and then it's just been remodeled over the years. And I, again, suspect that most of you, while not having consciously explored these places in yourself, know where they are and know how to get there.
Yeah. It's much like that one day where I sat and asked you where each emotion lived in your body, which is not technically related, but often asking the right question means, oh, it's over there.
Mm-hmm. So the question you're starting with is, where am I? What matters to me?
Or even more simply, where's home?
Yeah. And what does home feel like? What does it smell like, taste like, touch like. I have comfy chairs and soft blankets, and my cats, because they're cats, will absolutely show up and make noise at me. I have lots of books, and it's got that old library smell to it. I mean, and I can close my eyes and be there.
Mhm.
That's what we're looking at cultivating here. Where is home, and how do you find it readily? Because that is where the internal self-exploration starts.
Mhm. And size doesn't actually matter here. It could
No, it's like
be
a TARDIS. It's
a
always bigger
rim.
on the inside.
Yeah, like whatever you're working with initially is not the entirety of it.
Mm.
And quite often, once we've found your entry point and you can take a walk and go see other things and do other stuff, build more things. It'll just expand to whatever you need it to be, really.
I think another good allegory here is The Never-Ending Story, that movie that scarred so many of us
Oh
as
man.
children. But
I just made mine watch it the other day, by the way.
oh man, voluntarily traumatizing your children. What the
It's
hell?
not as bad as I remembered, and yet also
And
worse
yet
in some other
also,
ways.
right. And so there's the imaginary landscape that is that place, right?
Mhm.
And the nothing is eating it. And what allows it to be rebuilt is the memory of it.
And
And
the wishes.
and the
The wishes were
wishes.
very important.
Wishes, of course. That's kind of what you're looking to do here, is wish your way into your internal landscape. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And y'all, I encourage you to have fun. There's whimsy here. There's things that maybe you remember from childhood that you can build in and incorporate into your world. The whole point of creating an internal landscape is, so let's talk about that. What benefits do we gain from having access?
Well, you're asking me. So my first impulse here is to say, what benefits do you get from breathing? But that's a little bit tongue in cheek. And because I've basically always known about these and interacted with them and all of that, it's where else are you going to play? How else are you going to like visualize your ideas and see if they're going to be fun even or anything you like or don't like? How are you going to know yourself if you don't have somewhere to go play and practice? And I say this as someone, again, that has always had that there. So, frankly, I'm not sure how the rest of you do it without that.
I feel like it's the laboratory. In a very real sense, it's where you go to run the experiments, to test things out, to experiment with ideas and structures, conversations to an extent. But there are no people in my inner landscape that
That
I
is just untrue.
that
Maybe that
I
you've come across.
interact with. That I
Do you want
interact
me to
with.
list you some?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Generally speaking,
They're not people from the real world people. Let's put it that
no,
way.
no. And I mean, they're more, again, elemental creatures than anything else. because we're touching that metaphysical boundary here.
Yeah.
And to keep it accessible for people who don't know about that magic shit, y'all. What I want you to take away from this is that if you were writing a movie script or writing a novel, what would you build that world out to look like? And that's where we start, I think, is determining the landscape of our inner landscape.
Yeah, that's probably safe enough. Yes.
So structurally, it's the place of imagination, and physically, how do you encourage people to access it? Through meditation, through dishes? What actually works in terms of this kind of inner development?
Okay. I mean, meditation is traditional, but if you cannot stomach sitting and doing the meditation, and not everyone can, those moments before you fall asleep are actually really, really good for this, because you're semi on your way to dreamland anyway, which is not necessarily the same place, but it's close enough.
Right.
If you're able to kind of zone out while you're doing a task, it can work there too. But that's probably not quite as easy as just before you fall asleep, or just when you wake up in the morning. If you're not like getting up to an alarm and running around immediately, you can do it then. Certainly that was a lot easier before I had my child. So, your mileage may vary, but before sleep is the good one.
Okay.
And then if you're out in nature, if that's your thing too, it's actually quite a bit easier there as well. Or if you're looking up at the sky, I used to go actually when I was in the back seat of the car and we were driving around for any length of time. I would sit, look out the window, up at the sky or at the landscape or whatever, and just go. And I would be gone. Well, not gone, but I'd be over there doing whatever. And it gets a lot easier over time as well. Once you've gone in a handful of times,
I actually highly
more
recommend
often.
being a passenger in a car driving through the middle of nowhere at night with the full moon if you're having trouble. Right.
For it. Obviously not when you're driving. That's
not when be a passenger. You got to go be a passenger. But
I'm pointing to the side because UK, but either or.
And it's reversed anyway, so I'm sure.
I know.
Like,
I realized after I opened my mouth, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Structurally, when we talk about inner landscape, what's the advantage to awareness?
Mainly so that you're not freaking out when things happen that you didn't deliberately put there. I'm going to expand that a little bit, because I suppose if you don't know it's there at all anyway, you're not going to just be like, oh, suddenly there's a lamp. But you may have feelings you can't quite explain around certain things. Or you may be happily working away one day and then walk into a wall with your work that no matter how you try and logic yourself around, you're just not doing it. And there can be a lot of reasons for that, but this one is one of the ways where you can sort of take a peek and go, okay, what's going wrong with this? It's not diagnostic in the way of it'll tell you if you're neurodivergent or any of that. It'll just say, here, this is what your elementals are doing.
And I think if I had to name it, this would be where trust is learned and developed in terms of really getting to know your intuition. Knowing your inner landscape helps you define where those niggles of intuition come from,
Yeah, and your
what's causing
hunches
them.
and gut feelings and
Right.
the oh no vibes. Those become a lot easier to define and differentiate between once you're aware of your landscape. Because if you don't already know about your gut feelings and your intuition and what means what, a lot of them can sound very similar. And you can be in a situation where you're not sure if it's excitement or, oh my God, I'm in danger, because they feel quite the same. And when you can go and look at your landscape, it becomes a lot easier to figure out what the flavor of gut reaction is rather than just, oh, something's happening.
I think personally, and I do not speak for all the autists here, but I have become it's just facts, right? I haven't become nothing towards facts. That's the idea of what I can see, test, measure has always been structurally very important to me. Having a concept then of my own personal metaphysical doorway allows me to be more okay with the unexplainable. And I truly do believe magic is frequently just science that we haven't explained yet, right? Many things that we take as scientific fact now were once things that we burned people at the stake for. So as we learn and grow and progress, we're building for ourselves our own set of barometer or measurement, and knowing your inner landscape helps you define what those things are for the things that you can neither explain or understand, because you are a mere human and have not been granted understanding of all of the things.
Yeah, I mean, I remember hearing about thin slicing as explaining some of the gut feelings. And okay, fine, that's basically it's a snapshot of every other time you've ever felt this particular way in this particular situation. Where having an inner landscape and being able to go and look at it and talk to your elementals or what have you comes in is you get more of an explanation for the thin slicing. It's like you get the asterisk in the notes instead of just the oh no or whatever it may be.
And ultimately, this series is designed to help you figure out how to trust those impulses, to figure out how to trust your instincts, believe that you have them, and that you are capable of doing this work unsupervised. Thank you very much.
I mean, the harder part of it, when I initially said it was simple but not easy, is actually believing that you're doing anything at all. Which, if it feels effortful to begin with, it's a lot easier to believe that you're actually doing something. But after a while, it feels very much like just playing pretend, because it's a very, very sophisticated game of pretend that you absolutely should still be playing, by the way. And it doesn't make it any less real, but it is playing. And it's very easy, especially in our current society and culture, to just dismiss that as, oh, well, that's not real then. It doesn't count.
Mm-hmm. And I cannot emphasize the number of times I've said this, and will continue to say this, but productivity is not how you should measure a single fucking thing in your life as to whether or not it has value. And one of my intentions here with the Neurodiversity Media Network is to be able to explore these spiritual landscapes that we have neglected deeply in our lives because capitalism says it's bad and non-productive. And
it's
ironically,
hilarious to me, though, because the opposite, in fact.
And ironically, we build that into faith traditions themselves, right? Magical traditions in particular will give you a lot of shit for charging for spiritual services. The pastor of a church until fairly recently lived on site in pretty modest surroundings and was available all the time.
Donated to them was the thing.
So we have structurally, culturally devalued the inner spiritual work that is required to do some of the soul searching to discern what matters to you.
Essentially, to grow up into a whole person.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we're about here. So, if you would like to know more about Morrigan's game, that's at battlesworthfighting.com. If you would like to support the work that we are doing here, that is tomorrow, next week, neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. But until then, it's neurodiversitymedianetwork.substack.com. This week, I am premiering the paid podcast / video this week and I'm going to walk you through all of the content that we cover on a weekly basis with short little snippets. Plus, I'm going to give you the this week in the news so that you know what's going on and what's worth paying attention to and can then allow the rest of that noise to just filter on out. The point here is to get you your media and your news and your information in the format that is most digestible to you and to ensure that you can go out and do your work in the world, because that's what we're here to support. And if you would like to support our mission, you can do that at, we'll just say, neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. All right, y'all. We'll be back with Morgan in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about which elemental?
It will be Earth first.
Earth. Okay.
One, it's traditional, and two, structure.
Right. We start with foundations around here, my friends, always. So until next time, we'll see you in 2 weeks, and I will be back here again tomorrow with Faith Clark for her first episode about okay, I gotta look it up because it's new still. Work culture design. I got a couple of work podcasts coming that I'm very excited about. I'm very excited about this one. So I will see y'all here tomorrow. Have an amazing day. Bye, y'all.